Here are the 7 most common myths in fundraising. Myth number 1, fundraising is all about the ask. Now, obviously the ask is the most important part of any fundraising program, and for underperforming charities who are not necessarily meeting their revenue goals through fundraising or not meeting their financial goals with what they're bringing in, talking to people, asking for money, they probably are struggling specifically with the ask. But when we talk about fundraising as a whole, we really want to think about the entire portfolio, the entire spectrum of moving people along. The ask is one piece among a long step process of moving people through your mission and connecting them to something that excites them. Fundraising isn't sales in that you find people who want to give away money and you quickly move them along and you get the money and you go on to the next person. Ideally, fundraising is much more about relationship building, which takes a multi-step process. So instead of prioritizing the ask, though this is the most important part, it is the part that we want to think about in the eventual, we want to break it down instead into these steps. Number 1, identification. We want to talk about who can we go approach for money, who has inclination, likely to give to us, ability, some level of wealth that they can give away, even if it's a small amount, and access. Can we get to these people? We kind of look at all 3 of these factors and score them and say, though this person may look like a viable candidate, do they score high enough in all 3 of those categories where we can officially put them on our prospect list and make a list of 25 or 50 people or 10 people. It could be businesses, foundations we want to approach. So that's step 1. The next step is cultivation. This is all of the talking to the person that you do before the ask. We don't necessarily ask someone to marry us on the first date, and in the same way, we're not going to necessarily ask for money the first time we meet with a donor. This maybe doesn't apply to mailings or phone-a-thons where you're just trying to get small gifts, little outreach of saying, hey, you want to help the children, do you want to help the animals? A lot of people will say yes to that. But if we're looking at building lasting relationships to get transformational funds from people who have the ability to continually fund our organizations, and trust me, that's the people that you most want to have in your pipeline, it takes a little bit to learn about them. We think about cultivation as being, oh, we're going to go talk to these people, we're going to tell them how awesome we are, we're going to make sure they know every little thing about our charity. Where instead, what we want to do is learn about them. What are their philanthropic goals? What are they excited about? What kind of things have they funded in the past? If they've given us a small gift before through a mailing or a social media campaign, why do they give that? Why did they choose to make their first gift? What kind of impact did they hope that they had in doing that? And how can we apply that to a potential for a future gift? So the cultivation process hopefully is a two-way street where we're listening just as much as we're talking and we're exchanging information to kind of qualify them. This is also sometimes called the qualifying process. Are they a good prospect? If we determine that yes, they might be able to be someone who can support us from a financial standpoint, they have capacity, then we move into the ask or the solicitation piece. This is obviously, again, the most important step. It is the step that people skip the most because it's the hardest part, but it's not all of fundraising. It's just this middle step here. We're actually going to present them with an opportunity to fund something specific and have an impact, and hopefully it is mutually beneficial. They feel like they can get out of it what they want, and then we get to serve the people that we serve. After that is another step, stewardship. I'm just going to say stewardship, which is all of the cultivation that you do. It's a lot of the same stuff. It's sharing information, feedback, but it's after the ask. All of the interactions that we do with the donor after the ask. And hopefully, after stewardship, we then go right back into cultivation, and we have this kind of cycle where we steward them for a while, we cultivate them for the next gift, we make another ask, and it all kind of starts with identification. If you want to call it acquisition, you can do it that. If you want to call it qualification, there's lots of different words. But really, it's just this kind of 3-step cycle here that is not just the ask. It's so important to nail each of these steps so that you're not necessarily just getting a one-time gift, but acquiring lifetime donors to your organization. All right, myth number 2, only wealthy people can make a difference. Now, this is true at a large level. We have a huge percentage of the money that's given away in the US is from quote unquote wealthy people. But there are actually quite a few people who give in proportion to their income quite a lot more. We do a lot of work with larger organizations like hospitals who maybe have a couple thousand employees. They're technically classified as nonprofits, but they have several thousand employees. If you look at the ratio between what they make And we can see what they make because it's on the sheet, the payroll deduct sheet, and what they give. The highest percentage givers are your lowest paid employees by far. The people who are EVS workers, dietary, maintenance, the people who are hourly are giving a bigger percentage of their total income back into the organization than the people who are on the executive team. Now, granted, at the executive level, that would be a massive gift, but you would think that it would be maybe evenly distributed. So we know that people who are giving at the lower levels understand giving and still want to be a part of the philanthropic process. The other thing that we don't talk about a lot is we're looking for these big gifts. Why are we focusing on the entry-level givers? Why are we focusing on our annual appeals, the social media campaigns, the trying to get $100 here, $500 there? That increased boost in notoriety, in excitement, in word of mouth communication can mean so much. A lot of times, the bulk of our major giving portfolio will actually come from people who started with us in the annual giving or the lower giving levels. Someone who gave $100 once or $250 twice a year or something, and $500 the next year. And then we realize, oh, this person has now cumulatively given over $1,000. We should maybe go talk to them, do a little research to see, are they a viable candidate for these top levels? So we're saying, well, that person wasn't wealthy. They don't live in a neighborhood with a zip code in a fancy country club. It's like, well, we don't actually know the wealth. We have wealth screening tools. They're wrong a lot of the time, and we really focus on that wealthy group. And yes, we do want to do that. This is not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We don't want to entirely abandon our strategy to get top gifts. But we do want to look at that bigger segment and say, what are the other opportunities that we have at the lower levels, both in terms of volume and getting the word out, and hopefully upgrading some of those people to the larger gift levels eventually. Because if we can develop that full culture of philanthropy over time, that will pay way more dividends than going back to the same 6 donors for gifts over and over. Myth number 3 is that fundraising events are the best way to make money. This is very incorrect. If you take nothing away from this video today, it's that fundraising events are not effective at raising money, which is funny because that's like their entire design, or in theory their entire design. Fundraising events are a very low barrier entry point into fundraising. People may not know how to pipeline for major gifts. They may not understand the donor life cycle between cultivation and solicitation and stewardship, and then back through it, and how to move that, what we call a moves management process along. That is a little bit more complex. Maybe you need to have served on a fundraising team who does that well to know how to do it. It's not necessarily inherent, but most people could kind of fumble their way through and figure out how to throw a gala or a 5K or a golf tournament, or the things that tend to be fundraising events. Now, fundraising events don't raise zero money, but what they do raise is about 50 cents on the dollar. So it costs you 50 cents to raise $1, as opposed to going and talking to individuals, which is anywhere from 3 to 6 cents to raise $1. So it really is just not even close. Again, it's not the fact that, oh, I did a fundraising event and it cost us money, although we've seen cases where that is in fact true. You know, we raised $80,000. It's like, well, we spent $97,000 on the event, the invitations, and that's not even including all the staff time that we paid hourly to get but anyways, looking at events, the lost opportunity cost between what an event costs to put on versus the same time spent going and talking to people asking for money is just not even close. And if you're like most charities, I'd say that, you know, the bottom 98%, so almost all charities, your department probably isn't big enough to justify a fundraising event. But most charities start with events, even though they're the worst and most difficult and hardest ways to raise money. They just feel like they're easier to put on. I know I can accomplish it. We can raise something. No one's going to support us if we don't, provide them with hors d'oeuvres. It's like, probably not though. There probably are people who would serve you without the hors d'oeuvres and who would give money without you having to, give them wine and everything else. And you want to find those people. So events do have a place in a fundraising program. I'm not saying that they absolutely should not belong. Our top clients that don't do them have a great time because it saves a lot of staff hours, a lot of staff bandwidth to not put them on. But if you're new to this and you're just starting out, definitely don't lead with events. This is something that you maybe scale up if you have a 8, 10, 12 person department, you can maybe justify it at that point. But don't do fundraising events. Hey, thanks for checking out our video. If you're getting value out of this but would like something more personalized, you can book 30 minutes with one of our experts to see if you qualify for our support services. Link below in the description. All right, myth number 4. Fundraising is a one-time effort. It is not. We think about, oh, we're going to throw a fundraiser, or we're going to fundraise, or this year we're going to conduct a campaign and we're going to raise this money. If you do this correctly, fundraising is this continual process that reaches out all the way into the future. Now that kind of seems daunting because it's like, well, when are we done? It's like, probably not ever. Now, maybe if you're like the American Cancer Society and you cure cancer, you could probably be done. I probably don't need, that. But until they do that, they're pretty much not done. We really think about fundraising as these like kind of module one-time occurrences where it would be better to think about fundraising as this forever continuum that just kind of moves along in a line. That we're just kind of doing things along the way, that we're being as productive as we can as we go. But hopefully that line also moves up. And we also have this sort of trajectory of growth where along the way here, we're acquiring new donors and finding funders who are excited about what we're doing and not losing them along the way. So as we get these gifts along here and we're moving along, we continue to get new donors, and our revenue just keeps going up and our ability to serve our mission continues to grow up with it. So we're not looking at this, so we raised money, we did one thing, and now it's done. Finishing a campaign, especially with some of our clients, we'll run one campaign to the next. We'll do 8, 9 in a row over the course of obviously decades. This takes a while to do it, but we always want to have something next on the horizon. When you successfully raise money towards something, the reason it's not the end is because those people have had an amazing time connecting with your organization, funding something, seeing the radical change or the thing that you've served the community with, and they're just excited to do the next thing. Doesn't mean you have to immediately turn around and ask them for more money. It's just the case that we're going to try to, again, steward them, celebrate, talk about it, show impact, all the things that we know are correct, but then move into the next thing, and hopefully that same group of donors who just funded the first thing are A, willing to fund the second thing or the next thing, but also bring along their friends and bring along people in their peer groups and connect us to more people who actually would join us along the way and continue to increase our revenue. So hopefully post-campaign or post-project or post-fundraiser, your monthly donations should always be increasing month after month after month. It's just not a one-time effort. Myth number 5, fundraising is all about money. Fundraising is mostly about money. I will say that. This is not necessarily the case that fundraising is only about money and nothing else. It is mostly about money, but really kind of going back to what we talked about in the beginning, which was fundraising is about relationships. It's about relationships and it's about people. You might be able to do all the things right to get a single one-time gift, and you trick someone into giving, or you badger someone enough until they finally give in and give you a donation towards whatever, and you move on to the next person. And that's great. However, it might be better to then forge a relationship with that person where there's mutual trust both directions, and they'll continue to fund you from now on at some level. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to give the same giant gift every single year, but if you give them the right impact statement and you give them the right cause and the right campaign or the right initiative, they might be really excited about some of the same things that you're excited about. And we want to really lean into the people business, the people-oriented business side of this, so that as we are raising money, we're also connecting with lots of people on a human level, learning about their likes and dislikes, what they would like to accomplish with their philanthropy, the things that they are excited about, and have this kind of moving two-way street that we talked about, and really focus on individuals. If we focus on people, both from the volunteers, from our funders, from our board, the fundraising really falls into place by itself. If there's one thing to kind of aim at, I know that the money is the lagging indicator, it's the output, it's the thing that works well. But the input is to do people correctly, is to do a great job with people. Myth number 6, smaller nonprofits can't compete with larger nonprofits. This is also not true. Now, it is the case that the larger your nonprofit is, maybe the more budget that you have to hire development staff, maybe the more marketing that you have that you can get people to know about your mission and what you do, maybe the more people that you've served and the word of mouth. So of course, you're going to get a little natural boost. It's going to be a little easier for a large nonprofit to raise the same amount of money that a small nonprofit raises. But given that the bulk of the money given away that 80, sometimes 90+% of the total dollars given away come from a very small group of people. We don't have to worry about this kind of mass marketing where we're shooting out in all directions here and we're finding all these different people to fund us and we have thousands and thousands of donors. That's fine and it works. I think the average donation on like American Cancer Society, United Way, some of these big brands is like $18 or 20-something dollars, depending on which one it is. It's because they have a lot of online traffic and people give these small donations and people know about them. They're national organizations. They can do this. They can do this kind of marketing, fundraising, where they're not necessarily having to ask for these big gifts. They do, and they still get some, but the bulk of the donations are pretty small. It's kind of this one-to-many. As a small nonprofit, we can do a great job of the one-to-one fundraising. This one person, and we're gonna find one singular funder who's gonna do a big impact, and then we're gonna go find someone else, and then one singular funder gonna do a big impact. And maybe we can only have 3 or 4 conversations in a week. But if one of these people decide to give us a big gift, suddenly we have $100,000 or $250,000 towards whatever we're trying to do. So the size of your nonprofit doesn't necessarily have to be proportionate to the size gifts that you ask for. Now, if you're a brand new charity, it might be tough to ask for like a $20 million gift. There'd be a lot that you can justify. You'd have to have a really good idea of how you're gonna spend that. You have to have access to that person who can give that kind of money away. Some barriers there, obviously. But a large charity's ability versus a small charity's ability to ask and correctly receive and pipeline a $100,000 gift is pretty much identical. I know that's kind of a hot take, but it doesn't take that much more effort for a small team to approach and ask for $100,000 than it does for a large team. So keep that in mind. If you feel like, well, we're too small, we can't compete with the college, the local church, the hospital, some of these big behemoth nonprofits that are in our town, go talk to their donors or the people that you know who can give at that level, and you ask for that money. And you might be really surprised to see what people will be excited about, especially if you frame your ask correctly, you develop a great case for support, and you have a good vision for your mission. All right, myth number 7 is successful fundraising solely depends on the cause. And what I mean about that is that the mission will sell itself if it's the right mission. This can be true to some extent, and that's where the myth comes from. Babies, women, children, animals, there's some emotional factor in there where we're talking about helping groups that are having a harder time helping themselves. Sometimes those types of missions will sell themselves really well to donors. People like to help the vulnerable, as they should. That makes a big difference in some cases, but if your mission is not necessarily one of those things, there's absolutely a way that you can package and message your fundraising campaign. You can build your case for support in order to correctly push your mission forward. Here's some ways you can do that. The first thing that we want to talk about is kind of a before, a during, and an after. We go into a little bit more detail on this in our stuff about case for support, but I'll kind of give you the basics here so you can have a framework of like, maybe my cause doesn't resonate emotionally enough, or I'm having a hard time kind of packaging the emotions of my what I'm trying to do with our mission. So you have kind of a before. That's the first thing you start with, before. So that would mean like right now, let's pick a random charity. Let's say that we're the YMCA, right? And this is, we're not necessarily out saving lives, but it's a health club. Lots of YMCAs, most metro markets are going to have a YMCA. Before we have, let's say, 5,000 square feet. 5,000 square feet of exercise space, and we're able to serve, a third of the community or so. But if a third of the community wants equal access to be able to go take exercise classes and use treadmills and all the things that the YMCA does to promote better healthy living. Now, if we were to raise, we'll say $25 million, just for argument's sake, $25 million, then we could have 10,000 feet. So we have this kind of before, during, and after, and we want to talk about each of these steps in our case for support. So we don't want to go through and say, oh, we're raising $25 million because now we will have more space. But we want to then take it one step further and say, well, what does that space actually do? Well, it'll allow us to serve then 2/3, or anyone who wants access to equitable, healthy living, exercise classes, exercise equipment, a pool, all the things that we offer. This is the thing that our thing does, and we want to focus on that. So we always just have a before, a during, and an after, and that gets us to where we want to go. If you want to dive deeper on any of these topics, we have accompanying blogs on our website. You can schedule a chat with us, or of course check out many of our videos in our library, and follow for more fundraising tips and tricks.